Good evening and welcome to the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education regular meeting for Wednesday, October 26, 2022. Has this meeting been properly noticed?
Yes, it has.
Would you please call the roll?
Harms.
Here.
Salachi.
Here.
Wright.
Here.
Wyman.
Here.
Harlan.
Here.
Herzog.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this time, we are going to be joined by two students from Carl Traeger Middle School, Samantha Lieb and Sydney Ziegler, who are going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That was a good job. Thank you, girls. We really appreciate your being here tonight because it helps remind us when we have students here why we are here, and that's to put students first, which is inviting principal of the school district. So Sydney, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for bringing your parents here tonight and for joining us to do the pledge. And Samantha, pleasure to see you again. And here's a certificate for you as well. We thank your parents for bringing you. Now, you're welcome to join us for this meeting, but if you have homework to do or other more exciting and pressing things, we understand. Yes, but we really appreciate you being here. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the land acknowledgement.
As we gather today, we would like to acknowledge that in Oshkosh, we are on the ancestral homelands of the Ho-Chunk and Menominee people who lived along the western shores of Lake Winnebago, Wisconsin's largest freshwater lake entirely within its borders. We acknowledge that these indigenous communities who have stewarded this land throughout the generations and pay respect to their elders, past and present. We welcome the duty and opportunity to share stewardship of these lands.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Moving on then, we have board and administrative reports, starting with the board president's report. Our first order of business is a bittersweet one. We have invited former board member and board president Bob Peschel to join us this evening. Bob has taken a new job and was not able to continue on the board, and so we wanted to provide him with the recognition we provide other board members who have either chosen to step aside or needed to step aside for health reasons or other reasons. So I have a statement I would like to read tonight on behalf of Mr. Peschel. We recognize Mr. Bob Peschel and commend him for his contributions to the Oshkosh Area School District and as a member of its Board of Education. As a member of the Board of Education, Bob Peschel has served as board president for 1.5 years, board treasurer 1 year, Policy and Governance Committee Chair, Vice Chair and Member, Education Committee Member, Administrator Compensation Committee Member, Energy Committee Member, Legislative Committee Member, OPEA Negotiations and Meet and Confer Team, and alternate number 1, Partners in Education, Advisory Committee Member, City Planning Commission, alternate number 2, NTEA Negotiations Team, OEA Negotiations Team, IATSE, Confer and Liaison Team, TIF District Representative and alternate, Oshkosh Public Museum Board Member, Fox Valley Technical College Board of Directors Selection Committee, and Community Sounding Board Member. Bob Peschel, for nearly 5.5 years, from April of 2017 until September 28, 2022, has been a dedicated, involved, and passionate member of the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education. Bob demonstrated dignity and respect for all related to the functioning and operations of the school district, including students, staff, families, and the community. He is a positive advocate for all OASD employees, including teachers, custodial maintenance, paraprofessionals, secretaries, food service, and administration. Bob has sought to be a trusted steward of the district's finances, at the same time seeking to make positive long-term and short-term decisions to move the district forward to positively impact students, staff, and the community. The board and district have benefited from his support for the development of a school district long-range facilities plan, the opportunity for voters to approve the largest referendum in district history, for construction of 2 new schools, safety and security upgrades and infrastructure needs, accountability in implementing district strategic plans, energy upgrades throughout the district through the Energy Efficiency Program, establishing a Fund 46 for facility needs, including funds for the 10-year capital plan, upgrading running tracks at both high schools and the turf field at Oshkosh North, Global Studies Program at Oshkosh West, Brewing Futures food truck for career exploration for students with special needs, placement of a full-time counselor in each elementary school, Fab Lab at Oshkosh North, curriculum and instruction improvements, purchase of Chromebooks for all K-12 students, and purchase of hotspots for those who needed them. An emphasis on equity where all students can learn, and expansion of mental health services in our schools, just for a few examples. Finally, as a member of the Oshkosh Area School District community, Bob has represented the citizens, parents, staff, and students of his hometown community in an outstanding manner. Bob is keenly aware that the only reason for the Oshkosh Area School District to exist is for the education of all students in the community and promotes the district's guiding principle of students first. The board and district are grateful for Bob's service on the school board and wish him all the best in his future endeavors. Bob, would you come forward, please? We have several parting gifts for you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. First of all,
I'd like to actually state that I don't get all credit for everything that she said. There was a lot of teamwork there, so.
that's right. As board members, we have things that we stand for and that we help promote, but we don't do anything unless it's part of a collective effort. So first of all, here's a copy of the statement I just read. And the district is happy to present you with this plaque
Thank you.
commemorating your 5.5 years of service on the board. We have to get together a little closer here.
Thank you.
And finally, from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, a certificate of commendation and recognition for your service to the children in Wisconsin public schools.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please come back and visit us.
I will.
And continue to advocate for students in our district and our families and our entire community.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, everyone.
I guess I jumped the agenda here in my enthusiasm to recognize Mr. Keschel. We'll go back and pick that up in a minute. We also have a staff member who is retiring at the end of June of 2023. Christine Jeffrey, a speech and language pathologist, is currently serving as a half-time speech and language pathologist at both Merrill Middle and Webster Stanley Middle, and we want to wish her the very best as she moves forward into this next age and stage of life. Is there any other comment by a board member on that? Okay. And finally, I wanted to share some information regarding the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. There are opportunities in the coming month for Connecting with Lawmakers workshop, which should be relevant for our legislative committee. You can find this information online, but there are some dates of November 10th and 15th in person. The closest one would be Green Bay on Thursday, November 10th. There's also a statewide online workshop on November 16th. And so, since I missed the approval of agenda, I'm going to go back and pick up that item, and then we'll go on to the superintendent's report. Is there anyone who wanted to move anything in terms of its placement on the agenda this evening? Okay. I'm sorry to miss that earlier. I'll
That's
do
okay.
better next time. Thank you. Now we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. A lot of activity going on across the Oshkosh Area School District. First of all, Franklin students and staff recently gathered for their first school-wide assembly. One special highlight was getting to meet a new member of the Franklin family, Luna, a registered therapy dog. Therapy dogs can reduce stress, provide comfort, and help improve emotional well-being and self-esteem. It's great to see students connecting and benefiting from Luna's presence in our schools. Roosevelt Elementary recently held its first family night of the year. Families were able to explore various topics such as building of roller coasters, coding, dissecting owl pellets, and seeing a real-life owl, and much more. According to those in attendance, it was a hooting success. Yeah. Ms. Barbie Deasy, grade 7 cross-categorical teacher at South Park Middle School, was recognized as the WIXX Teacher of the Month for September. I had the pleasure of being part of that surprise announcement, so that was a lot of fun. We certainly are grateful for Barbie's impact at South Park and across our entire district, so congratulations to her. The Oshkosh High School class of 1962 recently chose to pay it forward to benefit current students in our district by donating $350 to the Brewing Futures Mobile Cafe. This is a generous donation that will go directly to paying our high school students with special needs for the time working in the Brewing Futures Mobile Cafe. The Oshkosh High School class of 1962 supporting 35 hours of work and training for our students, so we appreciate their generosity and kindness. Perry Tipler and ALP students recently enjoyed an all-school beach party, complete with music, games, and treats. The celebration recognized the great behaviors students display in school every day. Congratulations to those students. Carl Traeger Elementary started the school year with a one book, one community. Students had the opportunity to create an optional book report project and celebrate their reading with a family night. Celebrated their reading with the family night. Always great to see the students and families learning together. So thanks for everybody involved in that. Again, wanted to continue our reminders around the district's COVID-19 plan for the 2022-2023 school year that can be found on our district's website. And then also a couple of reminders. I wanted to share that students, parents, staff, and community members are all invited to participate in our survey designed to provide the school board with input about possible names for our new elementary school. The survey and more information is available on our website. The survey will close at 4 p.m. on Monday, November 7th. I also want to remind our community that we have a current school board vacancy. Eligible residents who are interested in serving for the board must submit an application by 4 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, October 27th. More information is available on the district website on our board elections page. And finally, here's just a list of what's been a busy couple of weeks in the superintendent's office across the community. So thanks everyone for continuing to be so welcoming. So it's been a great time. Thank you. That concludes the superintendent's report for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Next we have district administrator's supplemental reports. Verbal report from the October 12th, 2022 listening session from Dr. Benbach.
Good evening. We had one single person and one group address the listening session on the 12th. The single person who addressed the group addressed with 5 different, very succinct issues. The first one was helping spread awareness about Jacob's Network of Hope, which is a warehouse of goods. She was able to help get clothes for children and some other items. There were also some inquiries around what is the water bottle drinking fountain policy in the district, and do we have access to those in all of our schools? Because as you know, some of our schools are newer than others. The third point was just inquiring as to the policy of parent access when they come to pick up their child. Do they get to come into the building? Is there secure vestibules, et cetera? The fourth one was discussing green space at Val Phillips, and is landscaping as part of the budget for that project? The answer to that is yes, landscaping is indeed part of the budget. And lastly were comments in support of retaining green space for Val Phillips Middle School. The second group was a group of 4 individuals. There were more there than 4, but only 4 really spoke. And they spoke about being sad that we will be demolishing Merrill and encouraged us to keep the facility. Another person spoke with the same concern and focused their comments on the cost of demolition as well as the potential cost or the revenue of gaining when you sell the building. They also mentioned that the track should be on East Hall Park. The third person talked about the walking track that was eliminated as a concern. inquiring as to are there standards in terms of green space and what are those. And also, they supported putting the track on East Hall Park. And lastly, the final person spoke in terms of keeping Merrill School for its prominent architecture. So those were the groups that spoke at listening session on October 12th.
Any questions for Dr. Gudlock? Thank you very much, Dr. Gudlock.
You're welcome.
Next, we move on to other reports. Committee chairs. For the three committees on the agenda, Education, Facilities, and Finance, Policy, and Governance will each be giving a report. These committees meet typically monthly, and those meetings are open to the public, and we invite participation. So we'll start with the Education Committee.
Thank you. So we met on Thursday, October 6th, and 3 items that we had discussed. First one is regarding course additions, deletions, modifications. Not going to read through the summary here. It's on the board packet for tonight for us to review, so there was just a few of those items. We had a group from a local Girl Scout troop who had presented in front of us previously, who were looking to talk more about the Fetal Alcohol Syndrome Day for September 9th and what we can do as a district to bring awareness to that. So more to come, I believe, on that as we kind of figure out what the next steps and what we can do to bring awareness to that. And then discussion regarding class sizes was something that personally I've heard a lot about. And we did compare our class sizes versus other districts to see how we compare, breaking that down into different grade levels. For some of us, we know that it jumps from 3rd grade to 4th grade. The class sizes go smaller, which sometimes then decreases the number of classes in each school. So looking at, is that the right move? How does that, look for our children, for our students? It was mentioned that OASD does take multiple things into consideration when determining class size, students' abilities, teachers' experience levels. We continuously monitor those during the school year, providing interventionists when necessary, as well as making sure that everything can be done to make sure the students are in the right class size for their abilities. If we looked at potentially mentoring, professional development, and everything that we can do to help the teachers be successful, which then helps the students. So just had a really good conversation regarding that topic, and that's something that's personally important to me, and I'm glad that we were able to have that conversation and hopefully continue to down the road. So that was it for that meeting. Next scheduled meeting is Thursday, November 3rd. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carnes. Next is the Facilities and Finance Committee.
Thank you very much. We met on October 18th. The first item on the agenda was naming of the new elementary school, which is at the Webster Stanley site. And as you saw before, we have launched the naming survey, and it will run until November 7th. The results will be reviewed, and the top 3 or 4 names will go to Facilities and Finance. From there, we will have a second survey. The dates of that survey are 12/5 to 12/12, with the final vote happening at the board level on January 25th. Nancy Dolish is being honored at South Park. Dr. Davis is currently working with the family to be sure that we can get the spot that she will be honored exactly right, and that will be happening sometime in the future. HR, Sabrina Johnson, has requested a 52-week position to replace a 41-week position. This is in the staffing area for human resources. We do more work in the summer than we ever have done before, so we wanted to boost that position. Update on timing for referendum entrances, secure entrances. First of all, I want to say that all of the OASD schools currently have a secure 1-point entrance, and there are modifications that will be happening at Oakwood, Reed, West, and North that will make them a 2-point secure. Tax levy and budget revisions. Mr. Nehans reported that the operational general fund tax levy has continued to decrease. This is due to 3 primary factors: an increase in state aid, no increases to the per pupil formula, and declining enrollment.
Vouchers, however, are continuing to increase with vouchers equaling $4,744,834, an increase to the OASD tax levy by 68 cents. And the fund balance for our self-insured health insurance, the Department of Public Instruction, DPI, had us commit necessary funds to self-fund the insurance. That amount is $1.5 million. And the more experience a district has with self-funding, the lower the commitment amount will be. Our next meeting will be November 15th.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wyman. Next, we have the Policy and Governance Committee.
Thank you. The Policy and Governance Committee met on Tuesday, October 4th. And the first policy that we discussed was policy 1110, and it had to do with assessment of district goals. And the reason for us discussing that policy is because we want to have an annual calendar that outlines when we're going to be discussing data that's brought forth to the school board. One, so that it provides consistency for our district administrators, and two, so that we're not missing any data that we should be capturing as a school board. So we wrote that intentionally, or discussed and want to put that into policy so that it's a continual thing. The second thing that we discussed was policy 7510, use of district facilities, and that had to do with policy regarding different people being able to use facilities, athletic facilities, primarily on Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings. And what we did was we decided to table that policy discussion on policy 7510. And then lastly, we discussed policy 5540, and that had to deal with when we wouldn't notify parents if there was a potential issue with their kid and law enforcement or whatnot. And we decided to leave that policy as is. So there was no changes made there. So thank you very much. And our next meeting will be on November 1st.
Next week.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. All right, next on the agenda, our public forums. We typically have 2 public forums provided for each of our regular board meetings. The first one would be a non-agenda related public forum, and no one has signed up for that this evening. So we will be going on to our agenda related public forum, where 6 individuals have signed up to speak tonight. I just want to go over the expectations regarding those presenters tonight. We'd ask that you clearly state your name and your full address and the topic that you wish to address. If you are acting as a spokesperson for a particular group of individuals, we would ask that you please identify the group that you represent. Second, we ask that you state clearly and concisely the matters of concern. Third, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And finally, please remember that the use of specific names of district personnel, titles, or identifiable descriptions may lead to legal liability. In such instances, please pursue the district's formal complaint process by contacting the superintendent's office at 920-424-0160 to direct you to the appropriate administrator. So at this time, I will call up Mr. Hess. Tim Hess, please.
Thank you. Tim Hess, 2645 Templeton Place. Today I shared with you a number of studies. And the first one was this one, which was about middle school sports injuries. And on page 3 was a wonderful table that I'm sure you guys all consumed, because why not? I'm a doctorally trained biostatistician and I can't consume this. So what I tried to do was to summarize it in graphical format here. And so you've got the number of injuries by sport, and the purple ones are the sports that Oshkosh offers. And these are injuries that require a full athletic trainer evaluation. So they're not just putting on, say, a Band-Aid per se. And what you see is that track and field is the most injurious sport that we provide for middle school students. And that is in both just regular injuries and time lost injuries. And I appreciate that a number of people are probably going, well, that's relatively surprising, counterintuitive, but you got to appreciate that track and field is one of those sports that takes all comers, right? That every kid gets to participate. It's not just like, say, basketball, where you probably have to play a club sport for 5 years to make the team, per se. And what that means is a bunch of these kids, they come into it, and this is one of their potentially first athletic endeavors that they participate in, running on a asphalt track, or in many cases in a parking lot 5 times a day. Their bodies aren't ready for that, and that's why we get these injuries, per se. But there's a solution to that, and that is the other study that I provided to you is a biomechanical study that validated the fact that if we provide a synthetic surface or a rubberized track, that you can reduce those injuries by 50%. And so clearly, in my mind, that is in the best interest of the students, per se. But here's the thing. When was the last time you went and visited one of our tracks? We got one at North, we got one at West. Titan Stadium has 2 of them. You notice they're always surrounded by a fence. And that's because when you invest $1 million in a synthetic surface track, you don't want 770 kids meandering on that or crossing during recess or phy-ed, that you're going to end up taking something that is supposed to last 25 years and turn it into something that's only going to last for 5 years if you do that. And so my suggestion
About
to you
30
is
seconds,
this,
please.
that I would suggest to you that we preserve Merrill School. In so doing, we would save $1.25 million, and you could use it to get the synthetic surface track. That what you don't want to do is put it where district administrators are suggesting that we put the track right now, because that isn't being good stewards of the facilities that this community is entrusting you all with. So in my mind, saving Merrill School provides a gateway, an opportunity to give something for the kids. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Charles Williams.
Thank you. Charles Williams, 1416 Menominee Drive. I had sent an email to everybody today on the school board. I don't know if there's any questions directly, but I know students first is your main concern. It is also my main concern. I am not appearing on behalf of anyone. I'm in the kind of the group to save historic Merrill School. But I think that keeping Merrill up and keeping it available is a good idea for school activities potentially, or other alternative uses, which we haven't determined what those could be yet. That's part of the problem with voting 2 years early to tear it down. I think there's more time that needs to be taken to evaluate all options, whether it could be sold, as Tim, I think, is suggesting, and generate a fair amount of money, save a ton of money in demolition costs, and still have a 3.3 plus acre space for green space. What's creating the problem is this need for a 400-meter running track at this site that will dominate. It will just barely fit on what's there. So if you've got to have a track that's going to be limited to activities on the track, you don't want it to be limiting the other activities that can occur there. A soccer field, football, things like that, those would fit. A smaller track would also fit, but this 400-meter track is driving the need to tear down Merrill. And when are you going to tear it down? You got to first tear down Webster, then you got to rebuild Webster, so it's not exactly something that's going to happen. Maybe in 2 years if you're lucky. So why are we voting to tear it down right now? I would say you should vote to, if you want to vote to tear down the north additions, the post-1950s additions, because everybody agrees those will have to come down. But to vote tonight to take down the entire building without exploring all other alternatives for this building that could include You see people, refugees coming to the city, needing educational facilities. They need housing facilities. It doesn't necessarily have to be put into private hands. It could stay in your, in the school district's ownership.
About 30 seconds, please.
And so we've lost so many buildings in this town. This one could be reused and repurposed. Jim Larson, who's a pretty well-known architect in town, said of all the schools that have been saved or repurposed, this one is clearly the most beautiful design and significant. It is. And we don't, it's a spectacular building that we should not readily tear down. It should be a last resort. And so I urge you to please postpone a decision on doing that. And if you're going to vote, just limit it to that other portion of the building. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Carol Stevenson.
That's me. Carol Stevenson, 658 Monroe Street. I did send you all an email today, and I'm not sure if you had a chance to read it at all. I did get a response back from Stephanie, which I appreciate. So I'm just going to reread my email that I sent. I'm here tonight because I understand that you're going to take a vote concerning Merrill, and I wanted to be here to listen to how that vote would turn out. I have a few concerns. Why is there such a rush to take that vote tonight? You have an empty school board seat, and new school board members will be elected again in April of 2023. Why are you denying these school board members the opportunity to make a decision on Merrill? We all know that Merrill will not be touched for at least 2 years. The decision seems a little bit hasty to me. In addition, on the referendum that was passed, it was not clearly stated that Merrill would be demolished. In my heart, I feel that if this was maybe this was intentional on your part, I'm not sure, but I feel that in my heart, if the referendum had clearly stated that Merrill was going to be taken down, I think a number of people would probably voted no on the new middle school being built. I know I would have been one of those people. I cherish old buildings, and I would have clearly liked to have known that that was a plan. Based on the history of old schools in this town, I have not seen them demolished. I mean, I live over by Carlisle. They just turned it into apartments. We have couple other schools that have definitely been renovated and used as apartments. So I don't think, in my mind, truly, that I saw that was even an option on your part. I truly thought that you would keep Merrill. As a retired teacher of middle school students, yes, I taught for 33 years. Have you looked at and done any research as to how how students do use green space and how much of that they do use? I know that according to what I have seen, they want to retain 3.5 acres along with Merrill. I do jogging by Webster on a daily basis, and I watch those students out at recess. They all stand around in little clumps and talk. There's a group that throws around a football, but basically they're not using even the 3.5 acres of the acreage that is allowed there. So I'm not sure how much more room you feel that you need. Have you asked the PE teachers? Have you looked at their curriculums? Have you asked them how much green space do they use? How many times a year do they go out and use that green space? How many PE classes are going to be out there at the same time? How many people go out for recess at the same time? I mean, that alone should help you know how much green space you need, and hopefully you would see in your own mind that 3.5 acres is probably going to be good enough for them to have. Have you researched the savings to the taxpayers by selling the building? Have you looked at possibly recouping some money from not having to demolish the building? Maybe you'll save that $1 million that they're saying. I know that when you put this referendum through, that building costs, you didn't probably plan on the large amount of building costs that were coming up. Building costs are astronomical right now.
About 30 seconds.
Maybe you're running out of money. Maybe you could look at some options to save some of that money. Very quickly, listen, Stephanie, I spent many an hour and many a time on the phone calling and canvassing for you people to be reelected. I was one of those people that called on a Sunday. I worked for you. I'm just asking you to work for me and listen to what I say and take it sincerely to heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Next is Shirley Brabender, Mathematics.
Shirley Brabender, Maddox, 1313 Jackson Street. A diverse group of people assembled at the Oshkosh Public Library June 8th in response to a anonymous, almost, Facebook page from someone that most people didn't even know to discuss saving historic Merrill School. There was no leader to the group. Everyone was willing just to work together. They all answered the question, why save historic Merrill School? One, it was historically significant for the architecture you've heard. It was a source of community, Oshkosh pride in this beautiful school that we had. It was a part of the history of Oshkosh education, and it was eligible for the state and national register of historic places. We ordered yard signs, we set up a Facebook page, we researched the history of Merrill School, we discussed plans. For 12 weeks, we had a booth at the farmer's market. Initially, most people that came to the farmer's market had no idea that Merrill was going to be torn down. So by the third week, we had a petition to, quote, save historic Merrill School building for adaptive reuse, end quote, in response to people wanting to show their support. Today, I have almost 1,150 signatures and 292 online signatures for those who couldn't get to the farmer's market. There are signatures of former students, teachers, people who no longer live there. Here, we allowed that because they were passionate. But they wanted to go on record to first save Oshkosh's historic buildings and especially save, at this time, Merrill School. I've lived on Jackson Street for 36 years, right across from Jackson Field, Harold Shumworth Field, and I taught at Merrill for 12 years. The historic Jackson neighborhood, which runs from Church to Murdoch, where Ville Phillips is being built right now, the neighborhood was formed with a goal to create a street that was safe for those who walk, bike, drive, and live on Jackson Street. We included all those who cross the intersecting streets, which particularly involved students at Merrill
About
and the
30 seconds,
university.
please, Sheriff.
Whoa.
Shirley, sorry.
Okay. We have 15-mile-an-hour speed limit zones. We have flashing lights. We have a crossing guard. The police say their contacts for speeding is down so far, and I've got the police blotter to prove it, compared to north of Murdoch. And I just ask that I know, and you know, that students understand and they value the environment and sustainability. Please save historic Merrill so they won't have to one day say, like people have been saying for 60 years in Oshkosh, why did they tear down all those historic buildings that were
you
part
15
of
more
Oshkosh?
seconds.
No more litanies of losses. I just have to show you, this is the first Merrill mirror from 1933. And somebody brought it to me tonight. I don't know him, and he has all of them till 1944. They were saved by his family. It's a proud history.
Thank you so much, Shirley.
Could I
Thank you.
give you these?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Next, we have Ellen Anderson.
Hello, everybody. It's me again. I first want to take part of my 3 minutes to thank all of you that have spent some time listening to me especially during the last couple of weeks. I know I've met a couple of you out for coffee to just share ideas about the community that we're all passionate about. And others, I've spent a fair amount of time on the phone having some really interesting conversations. We're almost like friends and advocates together, all sharing a passion for the children in the Oshkosh School District. So I have to say, I understand that the group wants to rush to a decision tonight, but I'm not sure that's the best answer. As others pointed out, we've got some time, and we need to, in the words of, I think, of Christopher Carnes a couple of weeks ago, we need to make sure that we get this right. If we're going to do something, we've got to make sure that it really is the right way. And I know you strive for transparency, and I know you strive for clarity, but I see some holes in what's been presented. I appreciate Dr. Davis's administration looking at a variety of things that we've thrown at you about options, and I know your staff has spent time evaluating carefully, but some of the information about green space that we got back and how we're going to need this much for lunch and this much for research and this much for physical education, I'm not sure where those numbers exactly come from, and I think we need to evaluate that a little closer and get some more detail. But most importantly, I've listened to other community members talk about the value of green space. I agree, green space is very valuable. You're not going to have me disagree with that statement. And one of our proposals gives you saving the historic site and still having 3.3 acres of fabulous green space. Not to mention the fact that the whole neighborhood has East Hall, which is 8 acres, a block away, and a couple more blocks away is Congress Field and a park. So there is green space in the area. 3.3 acres is quite a bit, but you haven't even begun to explore yet what would a developer do with this project, with this particular building, historic section. There are all kinds of possibilities. It might even be possible that some of those new Val Phillips teachers and students would like to live in a facility that's a historic restored building, a hop, skipping away from a beautiful, fantastic new building. But no time has been spent yet on looking at those kinds of options. So you've got a new board member that's going to be coming on board. You've got some time. Let's make sure that we're getting this right. Let's make sure we have all the information, and we don't have that right now. Don't vote to tear down historic Merrill School. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Ellen. Appreciate your time. Our last speaker on this agenda-related forum tonight is Jean Erdman.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Jean Erdman. I live at 415 South Meadow. I was born and raised in Oshkosh. My kids went to public school here. I'm a retired education professor who for 15 years taught the middle school education class. Please raise the entire building. You were elected to the board to support children's and teens' educational needs. You need to vote to raise the building. Green space is needed. 803 middle schoolers don't stand still. They move. 11 to 14-year-olds need outdoor space to goof around. They're going to do this anyway, whether they have the space or not. They need the space. To goof around, talk, holler, run, throw a football. The new school takes up most of the Jackson Street area. Kids walking and arriving on buses and cars will arrive at the same time. Unlike when there's an elementary school and a middle school together, they arrive at different times. These kids are all going to show up at the same time, okay? Perhaps drop-off could be at the New York end with the idea that kids then can mill around some of the green space. You would know that better than I do. Perhaps some of that space at the New York end could be called the Merrill campus with a wonderful historic marker that preserves the information about our cultural history. Traeger kids have 20 acres of space. I have no problem with that. Yet some people are advocating selling off part of Merrill's tiny property. This is not acceptable. Oakwood and the district are already planning to reforest the district school forest adjacent to Oakwood School. I have no problem with that. Yet for the Val Phillips kids, the board is being asked to sell part of what is already not very much space. This is wrong. Val Phillips kids deserve space just like other kids. This old school, and this is not going to make me popular in this room right now, but this old school was not built by or designed by Frank Lloyd Wright on Plymouth Rock. Thousands of schools similar to most of it were built about the same time. Yes, the architect who built it connected the very old part with what then was the newer part, but this is what architects do. They make things look nice together. The idea of adding more traffic to an already heavily trafficked area that's going to be very, very full is also not acceptable to me. If you ask people if they want cake or not, or don't want cake, most people will say, I'll have some cake. People have been asked if they want to save the school, but have they been filled in on the details about kids giving up green space, having inferior fire and athletic facilities? I know that people do care sincerely and about the school, but I ask, where were some of these people when a few years ago I went in the summer and weeded under a previous administration because the weeds were this tall where the parents came in?
You have about 15 seconds.
Good. There are people in Oshkosh, many not represented here, who want to save green space. Your responsibility as a board is to the lively, goofy, wonderful, diverse, and bright early adolescents who will go to school there. I ask the board to pay attention to those kids and to equity in the district. This is what you were elected to do, raise the building.
Thank you, Dr. Usman.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. There was an old adage in the past that said that there were two things that people feared most at one time, according to a survey. One was death, and the other was public speaking. So I appreciate the courage that it takes to come and speak before a governing body and knowing that your remarks are maintained for posterity on the internet. So thank all of you for coming and sharing your ideas and perspectives. At this time, we will move on to the consent resolution agenda. For the consent agenda, the board has been furnished with background material on each item or has discussed it at a previous meeting. These will be acted on with one vote and without discussion.
Dr. Herzog?
Yes, sir.
Can I make a motion? I apologize. Can I pull one item from that, just due to a conflict of interest? I'd like to pull number 7.
I think that would be very appropriate. Normally, we don't do it this late in the agenda, but since I made a mistake earlier, which I will correct moving forward, I think that's a good idea. So we will move number 7 then to the individually considered resolutions, which is the committed fund balance to insurance. So I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda resolution, consent resolution agenda, and we'd need a second, and we'd need to vote on that.
Second.
That's Mrs. Carlin.
I believe I have to make a motion first.
Yeah, motion.
Yes.
Motion, sorry. So moved.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wright. Okay, please call the roll.
Solange.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Wyman.
Aye.
Carlin. Aye. Herzog.
Aye.
Kearns.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we will move on to the individually considered resolutions. Let's take number 7 first.
Point of order.
Yes.
There wasn't a vote to accept the other consent agenda items. We shouldn't just jump to individually considered.
I'm sorry, I thought we just voted to accept.
You just voted to pull
Move
7
7.
out, but not to accept all of the others.
That wasn't my understanding. I didn't think we voted on that. What was the intent of your motion, Mrs. Carlin?
That we would move 7 into individually considered resolutions.
I'm sorry, I don't believe that needed a motion, but since you
Oh,
made a
okay.
motion, we do have to vote on it, so.
Okay.
So the motion passed then to move number 7 to the individually considered resolutions. Therefore, we will now need a motion to accept the revised consent resolution agenda.
So moved.
Second.
That was Mr. Wright and Mr. Carnes. Please call the roll.
Wright.
Aye.
Wyman.
Aye.
Carlin.
Aye.
Herzog.
Aye.
Carnes.
Aye.
Solaji.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Now we will move on to individually considered resolutions, and we will begin with number 7. Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education commit $1,500,000 from the unassigned general fund balance to the committed fund balance for the self-insured health plan as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education.
So moved.
That was Mrs. Carlin, and second by Mrs., I'm sorry.
Solaji.
Solaji.
I moved. I'm second.
Okay, it's a little hard, your voices are soft and.
Sorry.
Anyway, all right, so it was Mrs. Solaji and Mrs. Carlin, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I got that right then. Is there any discussion on this item? All right, then please call the roll.
Wyman.
Aye.
Carlin.
Aye.
Herzog.
Aye.
Carnes.
Present.
Solaji.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to agenda item number 11. Thank you, Dr. Davis. Number 11, be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the 2022-23 tax levy outlined below as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education. Fund 10 would include $39,938,748. Fund 38, $3,154,855. Fund 39, $19,725,000. And Fund 80, $2,600,000, for a total levy of $65,418,603.
So moved.
And that was Solaji.
Second.
Second, Carlin. Is there any discussion? I'd like to call on Mr. Nehans. He does such a great job of explaining things, and that was one of the things that was noted in the district's the board's self-evaluation on the school perception survey, that we wanted to have clear and precise explanations of financial matters, and you do a good job with that, and I think it's important because we are setting the levy tonight that the public understand what we're voting on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. The tax levy that Dr. Herzog just went through, just want to highlight 4 items for the board that I feel is important within this discussion. The mill rate, we went from a $9.41 mill rate last year to a $9.40 mill rate this year. The second point on that is, again, remember that we are using our Fund 39 debt levy to help manage that mill rate. So this year we included an additional $8.6 million in the Fund 39 levy to pay our $42 million last bond that we took out this spring, to pay that off earlier to allow a greater capacity for borrowing with Phase 2 on a lesser impact on the taxpayers. So that was a very key part of how we're managing our mill rate. It's also important that our operational total revenue limit authority decreased by $2 million. That's a combination of our FTE student count decreasing, as well as the state aid. The last component of the tax levy that's also important is the voucher program. That continues to increase for our school district and our community. For this current 22-23 levy, $4.7 million is being taxed for students that attend a private school in the voucher program. That amounts to a 68 cents on the mill rate. So without the voucher program, instead of a $9.40 mill rate, we would actually be having an $8.72 mill rate. Are there any questions? I know there was a lot. Yes?
Mrs. Carlin.
Thank you. In looking at your notes, I see that the private school voucher program increased by $700,000 to $23. And that was just for last year. I guess that's my question.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any trending on the direction that that's going?
It continues to increase every year. Again, there's really no accountability within that program, so we don't know, we don't get any of the inside data on that. We just get the dollar amount gets thrown in to the formula, the worksheet formula we get from the state, and that's really all we get.
And so just to reiterate what you said, the voucher program is spending $4.7 million, or I'm sorry, we're losing $4.7 million. The taxpayers are paying that. Is that
Correct. We have to tax for that dollar amount, and then we don't receive the money. It goes straight to the school, the school systems themselves.
Okay. And we have no way of knowing how that money's being spent or who gets it. It's
Correct.
$4 million.
We do not.
For the voucher program. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding the tax levy?
I
Mrs.
just want to
Salati.
say thank you for having Mr. Nehans come explain this. I think in the school board's perception survey, I was probably the one that advocated for that. So thank you for remembering that I wanted that and having it happen.
It was an anonymous survey, so
It
I
was.
did not know who did that.
But as
so.
you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was me.
I'm sure there might have been others of us who thought that as well.
I think, well, maybe a good thing to note, and I think it's a positive that we refinanced a lot of our debt earlier and locked in low interest rates before they rose. Could you give since we've got a bunch of people here and watching, how much money that'll save the district long term, if you had to estimate?
Oh, I believe by structuring our debt the way we did and getting the complete referendum financed in the one bond and the note, it was in the neighborhood of $33 million is what we saved taxpayers on that $107 million bond.
Yeah, it was very smart to refinance when interest rates were a lot lower, because the taxpayers are going to benefit a lot by saving that $33 million, because you came up with that idea and the board supported it. So just so everyone in the community is aware of what a good job you did on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Mr. Nehans? Thank you, Mr. Nehans,
Thank
for
you.
your report, your written report, as well as your oral report tonight. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on then, our last individually considered resolution is resolution number 12. Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the demolition.
Point of order.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We gotta
didn't
approve
do the
it.
vote.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to move this meeting along. So I have to slow down here. I'm very sorry. Let's vote on the on the tax levy.
Aye.
Herzog.
Aye.
Carnes.
Aye.
Salaji.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
Wyman.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to resolution number 12. Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the demolition and removal of the Merrill School building as well as an amount not to exceed $50,000 for the purposes of a memorial to James Merrill, Harold Schumerth, and the Merrill School building as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Salaji and Mrs. Carlin. Is there any discussion?
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, I have.
There should be.
All right, so I think we owe it to the people who have been coming to our facilities and finance meetings and to our board meetings and to the public at large for any comments that you wish to share on this before a vote may be taken tonight. Mrs. Carlin.
Well, I have a few comments and talking points, but I want to get out my question first. What is the $50,000 memorial entail? And I'm kind of wondering where that number came out from and what that's going to look like. And
Yeah, so that'll be a work in progress. So the idea is to be able to memorialize James Merrill, Henry Allard, and his architecture of the Merrill building, and then Coach Schumerth, Coach Schumerth, and a memorial to be set up in green space that would be allowed on that site. So what that looks like would be kind of up in the air. We've looked at engravings, memorials, statues. We've priced out some things that would be, I think, appropriate on that site. So we just wanted to make sure that there was some guidelines and expectations of the amount of money that the board would contribute to that, and if there was a solution, and I would want to work with community members on an appropriate solution. If there was a solution that was beyond that $50,000, then that would be something that we could fundraise for, or find alternative solutions. So that's the idea. We don't have anything imprinted, but that was just an estimate off of just some preliminary estimates that we had received.
Okay. Well,
excuse me, did you have something else?
I was just going to follow up on that.
Okay.
When I guess I'm trying to picture what would cost $50,000 for memorial. So I guess we'll find out more later.
Right.
But that does seem kind of high to me.
And that would be a not to exceed number.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I've been anticipating this meeting, and I know I put the cart before the horse more than once tonight, so I have to rein that in, literally. But I know that Dr. Davis also wanted to make some comments, so I think we'll start with his comments, if that's all right with the board, and then we'll go to the
Absolutely.
board comments and questions. Dr. Davis.
Sure, thank you. So I want to start tonight by thanking everyone for their dialogue on this important topic. The information that's been gathered over the last 6 months at open meetings, open committee meetings, open listening sessions, and open board meetings has really pushed our thinking on this topic. Our administration team has reviewed several options offered from people throughout the community. The historical preservation of our buildings is always a consideration that is weighed with the necessary space for our students. So there's always a balance that we're attempting to strike. Past opportunities, most recently Smith School, have provided chances to preserve historic buildings and improve students' school environments. Washington and Roosevelt elementary schools are examples that I anticipate being opportunities for historic preservation in the near future. Merrill School, because of its student capacity and the need for green space and co-curricular facilities at the new Val Phillips Middle School, is being recommended for removal. When we took a look at the students per acre estimate on some of our campuses across the district, we took a look at our proposal for Val Phillips with removing the Merrill School with approximately 800 students in our new school when we opened that up. We looked at the 5.9 acres 5.93 acres of green space that would be there if the building was removed, which gets us to about 135 students per acre. In comparison, E. Cook has 232 students on 4.35 acres of green space for about 53 students per acre. Tipler Middle School has 331 students with 11.7 acres for 28 kids per acre. Now this area is a retention pond, so that isn't always the case, but a majority of the time students are able to use that for recess and PE purposes. Looking at Traeger Middle School, as was mentioned earlier in this meeting, we have a lot of land out at Traeger Middle School, but if you look at the specific area that our middle schoolers use, on the front half of that building, it's about 3.1 acres with 457 students at Traeger Middle School for 147 students per acre. The Val Phillips School proposal, by keeping Merrill with 803 students on 3.3 acres, gets us to about 243 students per acre. We must remain conscious of equity throughout our system, including in our facilities and campus designs. Removing Merrill School allows us to maintain comparable green spaces for our middle school students across the district. So I just want to thank all of you for your thoughtful discussions up to this point and your consideration of the topic tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Is there someone else who would like to share any thoughts or comments, questions?
Yeah.
Mrs. Szilagyi.
I'll go. Gosh, I have had a lot of thoughts, and I tried to just narrow them down because I know I'd want to share them. I felt like that was really owed to the community members who have been reaching out to us. And I also have a lot of gratitude for the work that the SAVE Merrill School individuals have done this past month as I've been driving around Oshkosh. I've just been a lot more cognizant of all the historic buildings that our city has, and I think that we have a lot to be proud of. Former high schools are now the city hall. The original courthouse and library, I think, are just gorgeous. Old schools are condos. An old hospital is housing. The city has done a really good job of saving historic buildings, and I recognize that a lot of that has to do from the work of people like those who've spoke to us and emailed us and called us. So I have gratitude for that. I also, another thought that I've had that I want to share is, to me, this whole experience is a reminder about how board member requests have a very large ripple effect. So I think this all came about because as a board, we decided it was worth having this conversation. That was a request from a board member, and I'm not here to say whether that was a wrong request or right. I've appreciated having this conversation. I do think it was important to have this conversation, but it's just really stood out to me that that request has had such a ripple effect in our community. So that was part of the training I received as a school board member, was to always consider that the requests we make can have a very big impact. And then the final thing is, for me, this really just does come down to what Dr. Davis shared about students needing green space. For me, it's not about putting a track on the green space. It's not even necessarily about just the students that will be at Merrill, it's about the whole neighborhood. I am so grateful to live in a part of Oshkosh where there is a lot of green space close to my home. Just this past weekend when it was so nice and warm, my 12-year-old and his friends met up and played football at the nearby elementary school's rather large green space field. And so for me, whether it's the public students that would attend Merrill, the children, the adults that live in that community walking the track when it's built, if that is the direction we go, that is why I believe that keeping as much acreage as we can is the best decision to make, even while I recognize not everyone agrees with me on that. I did want to share this information. The ideal acreage is 20 acres for middle school of about the number of students we'll have at Merrill, and that comes from the Association for Learning Environments, and they note that that's the ideal. Obviously, we can't relocate Merrill to a spot that would give us 20 acres. What we have to work with is what the district already owns, and I wouldn't suggest that we make that any less than what we have, because we are barely like halfway at the ideal. So I just felt like I owed it to people to share what my thoughts had been on this topic, and that's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Salaji.
Yeah.
I'll go.
Mrs. Wyman.
This is a picture, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but this is a picture of Bill Van Leeshout. Bill Van Leeshout was a middle school teacher and coach for 30 years at Merrill, and he was also the boys and girls tennis coach at North for 20 years. He was a mentor to many and a friend to more. The basketball court at Merrill is named in his honor. And I started thinking about that. Bill and I did a lot of work together trying to raise funds for the Oshkosh North tennis courts redo in 2009, where he won the prestigious facility award. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that year, and he passed away in 2011. But even as he knew he had a terminal disease, he continued to take his boys' tennis team to state to place 5th, and he continued to raise money to light those courts at North. So I was thinking about him today, and I contacted his wife, Sandy Van Leeshout, and she contacted her children. And then I had another conversation with her, and this is what she said. I said, I talked with the family this morning about how they felt about the possibility of raising Merrill and losing the Bill Van Leeshout court. Sandy said, while our family was honored by the dedication, green space is so important for the lives of children. Thousands have benefited from outdoor activity, Bill would want as much space as possible for the kids. He wanted kids to run and run hard. I heard over and over from not just this group, but many people in the community, that middle schoolers will not use the space, that they will be on their phone and they won't have any use for it. And that may be true, but in our lifetime, maybe there will be another Bill Van Leeshout who insists that kids get outside and kids run, and they run in all seasons. And his legacy is believing in kids and giving them the power to participate and become better people for it. There are very few sports that a child can participate in without spending a lot of money. And running and tennis are the two that he believed in, and I believed in him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
And thank you to all of you. I've talked to so many of you and emailed, and I have every passion in the world for old buildings, and I really, really do appreciate everything that you have done.
You wanna go?
Go ahead.
I guess I can go. Well, it was nice getting to meet all of you and get to know you. I've thought about this decision for a long time, and I've thought about the impact it'd have on the kids, the impact it'd have on the community as far as still having Merrill there as a building or not. So I wanted to do a bunch of research. So I went the other day when I dropped I have two middle school daughters. They're in 6th and 8th grade, and they attend Carl Traeger Middle School. And I dropped them off for school, and the area was just full with kids playing outside on every square inch of the front of Carl Traeger Middle School. So I thought to myself, I wonder what the acreage is of Carl Traeger and just the front part of Carl Traeger Middle School. So I contacted the school, did some research, and it's 3.1 acres. So then I thought, well, that's really full, and Carl Traeger Middle has half the amount of kids that are going to be going to Val Phillips. So that right away made me think, if where they're playing is pretty full with kids, and kids play and use the space at Val Phillips, that's going to be really, really congested and full. And my kids come home with a lot of other middle schoolers often, and they play games that they've learned out on the playground with their friends, Foursquare, whatnot, this and that. And they have an adequate amount of space there between what's in the front and what's around the back. And for all the time we spend talking about how all kids deserve equal access to different opportunities in this community, I don't think that I'd be doing a very good job of that if, when we created this new middle school, if we didn't allow those children that are going to attend that middle school there to have that type of access to that green space as well. So that is where I went with the decision, because I think all kids need access to good green space they can play on. Not just my kids, because they go to Carl Traeger Middle. The new kids at Val Phillips need that too. So that's all I have to say, and thank you guys for all your time and all the tough conversations we've had and all the meetings we've had. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. Carnes.
First off, to all of you that sent in emails, I want you to know that I read every one of them, and so I appreciate the time and that you all took to send everything in. The decision being made tonight is not a rushed decision. We have talked about it at multiple board meetings, at multiple committee meetings, and so I just want to say that we have taken time to look at all the different options. I appreciate all the different mock-ups that were brought in, that were shared with us to see what it would look like. I think it's important that everyone is allowed to speak and share their thoughts. And when decisions are made, that everyone has been listened to. And while we may not agree with every decision that we make, we have at least listened, because I believe that we agree on way more than we disagree on. And so I think the conversation a little bit has been taken over by the track conversation. And I from what I understand, there's not money in the budget to put a track in on that space right now, and that's kind of where that conversation went. Right now it's about green space for the kids to play on, to have access to. Where it goes from there is up in the air. But I think that's that conversation seems to have been sidetracked, that it was saving the building or putting in a track, and I think there was a lot more in between on that. Some part of the conversation was regarding selling it to make money, to be able to put that money back into Val Phillips. That conversation got me thinking, so I appreciate that. Got me asking questions. One of the big things for me was when we removed that walking track from Val Phillips. If you watched the meeting, that did not feel good to me, and I was very vocal on that. But that's gone. That architecture has been tweaked, and we don't have the ability to do that. We are working creatively to find solutions to be able to put the full bleachers into Val Phillips, and that's something that's been brought up and something that we will work on, because I think we all appreciate the importance of what that looks like. I'm bouncing around here as I wrote a lot of notes down. So, the demolition and removal of Merrill was part of the referendum budget, and so there's no added expense for that. I reached out today as well, because you all deserve it, the community deserves it, the building deserves it, and ultimately the students deserve it, to ask questions. Sounds like from my research, if that building was redeveloped, it would involve the need of TIF assistance to do that. And it does not sound like that is in any way a guarantee to be available for that. And so I think that's an important piece as well, that if the city is not interested in that, that changes that conversation as well. And the difference between this building and Smith, which happened before I was on the board, was that this property is still valuable to the school district, whereas that one was not. And so there are differences between how some of this stuff came about. And this property is obviously very valuable to us and what we want to do for our students. I checked in with the teachers to see what the teachers thought of this idea, who spent many, many years within that building. And from what I found out, the majority of teachers are behind the removal of that building. They want to give those kids green space. They want to give them the opportunity to set up generations for success down the road. And I think Jean made the comment a couple meetings ago that reminded me of sometimes nostalgia makes you think back on how great a building or something was, and maybe it wasn't that way. And I've actually heard a lot of people talk about how the building's not in really good shape. It's not in really good condition. And so I think it's important that while there are some architectural importance to the building, it's also in a pretty rough shape. So I think it's important to have all these conversations. You all are owed it. The community is owed it. And I think that for me is important that we, have this conversation here. See if I missed anything. No, I think that was it.
Thank you, Mr. Kearns. Is there anyone else? Mrs. Carlin?
Thank you. First, I would like to, again, thank the community input, and I did read every single message, and I took it into consideration. This is a very difficult situation for me. It's not something that we are taking lightly. I had to flash back to 2018 when we first started about talking about going to referendum. And at the time, it was the recommendation of the community that Merrill be replaced. And the reason being is in 2018, Merrill had a $12 million price tag of deferred maintenance needs. And deferred maintenance means tuck pointing, 39 roof patches, electrical boilers. This is just the bricks and mortar, if you will. And it would require another many millions to get it up to speed to make it ADA compliant. We had a parent come in who was in a wheelchair and said his students could not attend Merrill because it was not handicap friendly, and he couldn't go to the games because there's only one elevator that was 20 minutes away from the gym. So really the impetus to even go to referendum was based on community feedback that building had reached its sunset, if you will. And I do believe that buildings do have a lifespan, especially when the building has multiple additions. While it is a beautiful building, when you factor in inflation, it would cost $14.5 million just to make it up to speed and just to make the necessary requirements to make it function as a building right now. And when the board made this decision, we felt at the time it was a fiscally responsible decision to not continue to put more money into this building. And it was our intent that it would be demolished from the very beginning. From my perspective, it's about equity. All students deserve to have green space and deserve to have the best learning environments that they can possibly have. And if we removed, Dr. Davis sent us some information regarding the students per acre. If we did not have that space compared to other middle schools, Tipler has a 28 kids per acre. Traeger has a 147 students per acre ratio. Bell Phillips' proposal, 803 students would have 135 student per acre. If we did not have that land, the Bell Phillips school, 803 students with 3.3 acres, that would be 240 acres per student.
Other way around.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So the ratio would be 243 students per acre. And to me, that's not equitable. It's not equitable for those middle school students that are going to be going to that school. And I do believe that we need to keep our promise to the community, because the potential demolition of Merrill was what we had talked about. And again, when this came to us in 2018, it was the result of a year-long study for our facilities planning project, and that had multiple community members in it. We, at the time, also heard from city officials that the neighborhood in that area has a capacity. We're going to have 803 students at that new Merrill school. Developing it for housing would create more congestion, more traffic. That neighborhood is a pretty tight space right now. And the thought of having middle schoolers have to cross the street to go to another facility, especially at that age, I feel like it's unsafe. And I had one more point. Again, I just want to reiterate that I appreciate the feedback from the community, and I also wanted to acknowledge that in April 22, August 22, and September 22, we had conversations about the future use of current Merrill Middle School, and we have been talking about it for quite some time. It's not a last-minute decision. It's something that's been going on for a long time. So with that, again, I would like to thank the community, and I do understand this is difficult, but I think that our students deserve that green space. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carl. I'd also like to weigh in. I really want to thank everyone who took time to write emails. I tried to respond to as many of you as I could as of yesterday. I know that there are many that came in today, and I didn't have an opportunity to respond to those, but I really value that input because many of you introduced ideas that perhaps I hadn't thought of or hadn't explored in great depth, so it stretched my thinking. I'm usually someone who doesn't have trouble falling asleep at night and staying asleep, but I've awakened many times in the night thinking about Merrill School and the implications, the ramifications of this decision. There's a big opportunity cost here. I recognize that, and that weighs heavily on me because we have a beautiful building that is probably beyond compare in terms of any other building in the city. I did take art history in college because I thought I needed to know more about that. But there's a lot more about art history and art overall that I need to know. But I don't know that there's anything comparable in terms of that Art Deco facade in the city of Oshkosh, even though I understand Henry Aller designed some other very beautiful buildings which are still up in use. At the time of the 2020 referendum on building a new Northside Middle School and elementary school, we didn't know what the future held for the East High property. And I think we need to very publicly acknowledge the efforts of Chancellor Andy Levitt in making that space available to our students in that neighborhood for recreation and for other uses that may be made of that. So we don't know what the future is going to be for East Hall, but the gift that Dr. Levitt and the Board of Regents gave us in terms of a 90-year lease at $1 a year was something that we could not pass by. Because once green space is gone, it's gone. In my nearly 10 years on the district, I do not recall the district selling any property that had, selling off some of the green space, other than Smith School where the entire piece was sold. But there was one, I believe it was one lot on the Perry Tipler property that was sold a few years ago that was in a corner of the lot that was not deemed beneficial for recreation, FIED, lunchtime use. And I believe a house has now been erected on that site from which there are property taxes being paid that help us. The writing of the referendum question has come up numerous times. I've talked with people who have told me we knew that meant the building was likely to come down, but I've also heard from many people who said they didn't understand that was a likelihood. Two of my core values are honesty and integrity, and I can tell you that from my perspective, that's the viewpoint that question came from. It was not intended in any way to be deceptive. We did not have any idea what the footprint of that building would be exactly like when the first, until the first shovelful was actually put into the ground. But we didn't know exactly what that footprint was going to look like until the referendum passed. The architects could get to work on that and present that to administration. It has become clear, however, I think we all understand that there's no space, there's no green space on what had been Schumer Field, or which many of us knew as the Jackson Street Athletic Field, from which my brother and sister both had their high school graduations. And in looking at some old yearbooks, I know there were some really exciting times on that field, not only football, but more recently soccer and some other activities. I also understand there were some wrestling, professional wrestling or boxing matches there some time ago. So that space also has a very rich history. But as far as the referendum question, because of the perceptions that have been expressed, that has stretched my thinking, and it has caused me to know that we need to do a better job when we have those referendum questions written as to what is being conveyed to the public. So that's something that certainly we can work on. As I said in some of my emails to a few of you, this is a very complex issue because we have historic preservation, and as a social studies major with a history minor, history has always been very important to me. And I understand that once a building is gone, it's gone. And you can't resurrect it. I also recognize we have a housing shortage in this community. I volunteer at the St. Vincent de Paul store, and one of the things I do there is, like representatives of the other two Catholic churches, is to provide rent assistance and utility assistance to many people every month. I'm aware of rents going up. I'm aware of people telling us they can't find a decent place to live or rent in Oshkosh, and that's problematic. So yes, we need housing. I don't dispute that. Another variable for me is our guiding principle of students first. Somebody emailed me and said, well, what does that mean? Well, to me, students first means that we weigh every decision in terms of how it will impact students. How will it impact students and future generations? So when Val Phillips opens up, it's going to be 800 plus students according to current projections, and then 800 the next year and the next year potentially. So thousands of students are going to be involved in this, and then trying to weigh that and the opportunity cost of, yes, but we're going to lose this remarkable piece of architecture and facade, this Art Deco piece that will be gone forever. And then I look at the students and then also wonder where else in that part of the community can there be housing to help some of these people who have trouble making their rents and their utilities. I've heard from several people that there's a sense that we're rushing to a decision. Another perspective to me is that we're almost 2 years out from the referendum, which passed in November of 2020. In addition to that, we've had Facilities and Finance Committee meetings in April, August, and September of this year, which were all followed by presentations by a committee member, usually the committee chair at this board. We've also had listening sessions where people have come forward. So I don't feel that we have rushed to a decision here, but there is so much to be done in terms of preparing for the fall of 23 and 24 after the opening of Val Phillips and the new elementary school, that administration needs a runway to prepare for all of that. There was an email that came through today that talked about a number of buildings around the community that have been preserved, including the Howard, the Waters, Smith School, the Cabrini Lofts, and so on. And I reflected on that for some time, and I appreciate all the work that has gone into those, and people who had the vision and the foresight to promote preserving those structures. But then I began to think about, well, what's different than with Val Phillips? And Mr. Hess had provided some aerial views of the area with a couple of different variations of how to preserve the Merrill building. And the administration had also provided one. And one of the things that struck me was the population density in that area. The lots don't seem to be particularly large. I didn't measure them, but they don't look very large in reference to one another. And then the amount of trees. We are, after all, known as Tree City as well. But the idea of having apartments in there, potentially with garages, and as someone mentioned tonight, the traffic, the increased traffic. New York Avenue is a busy thoroughfare. Jackson Street's busy. Kentucky, I'm anticipating is going to be much more heavily trafficked once the new building opens, and then the potential for apartments in there all coming out onto Kentucky Street, I think would provide a challenge. Another email I received questioned, where did you get these numbers from? I thought that was a good question too. In doing a little bit of asking of questions, I'm not sure I'd call it research, but I learned that the school is projected to open with 803 students. So just to keep the math simple, let's say it was 750. They're projecting 3 lunch periods, so that'd be 250 students per lunch hour. So that's where that number came from in terms of how many students would be out there for lunch. And according to information supplied to us by administration, the Save Merrill School proposal would provide 3.3 acres, so 243 students per acre would be out there. So they would occupy quite a bit of that space, as Mr. Wright had noted. And then someone asked about, well, how many students would be in Phi Ed? Well, again, just to keep the math simple, they have a 7-period day. So if they have 700 students, that's roughly 100 students per class hour who need a Phi Ed class, need space to move around, whether they're playing soccer, football, baseball, softball, walking laps around the perimeter of the area. So those were some things that weighed in too. And this has been something that I've really spent a lot of time and thought on, and it's, as I said, it's your emails and your phone calls have really stretched my thinking. But I believe in the long-term best benefit for our students. We need that green space for those students in that neighborhood. The North Side Middle School will be the largest in the city. It will have the highest percentage of free and reduced lunch. And from an equity standpoint, I think that it's important to provide them with as much green space as possible. We never said we've had too much space at South Park, so we should sell off part of the park, or Menominee Park. North High School, I don't believe we've sold any land from there. And so I will be voting in favor of the resolution. Anyone else?
No.
No. I didn't mean to squelch anybody else, so please,
No.
if you had something else to say, this is your time. Mr. Wright, you look like you might want to.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion has already been made by Solaji and seconded by Carla.
All right, we're going.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's why we could discuss it.
Yeah.
See, I'm not the only one who puts the cart
That was a long
before the
time
horse
ago.
today. I know.
Okay.
Ready for roll?
Yeah.
Okay, please call the roll.
Herzog.
Aye.
Carnes.
Aye.
Solaji.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Wyman.
Aye.
Carlin.
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Thank you. And thank all of you for your interest and your support. We look forward to hearing from you on other items. Sometimes it's not possible to satisfy everyone, but I think you've heard from my colleagues tonight and Dr. Davis. We have listened, and we have tried to do the best for our students. So, thank you. Next, we have requests for future agenda items. Is there anyone who would like to suggest a future agenda item?
No.
Hearing none, I'll go on to announcements. I just want to remind the board that the annual State Education Convention is coming up in January. The dates are January 16th through the 20th. And we have 3 presentations coming from our district. Dr. Davis is going to be presenting. I understand Dr. Gunlock has a proposal that's also been accepted. And I also learned that our transition program for our special needs students into the workforce, which includes Project Search and the Brewing Futures food truck has also been accepted for that convention. And I'm also very happy to note that we had 2 proposals submitted from our high school music departments, and the Oshkosh North Chorale will be presenting on the Friday of the convention. So I hope we can all go and support our music program, which is so vital to the growth of our students. Are there any other announcements?
No.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. Wyman and Wright.
Yes.
Please call the roll.
Carnes.
Aye.
Szilagyi.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Wyman.
Aye.
Carlin.
Aye.
Herzog.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Liz, is this yours?
Thank you very much. Just a reminder to the board, we have that joint meeting tomorrow night with the city council.
See y'all at 5.
So